I just want to take a minute to say, because I haven't said this lately, but I can't tell you how good it is to have these kiddos join us. I know that a lot of this is on them, but the fact that they're learning to interact with adults and study the Bible, and just the fact that they're present is just, it's just really encouraging. So I don't say that very often, but thank you to especially the Bekejan clan and the Ferguson clan. And that's not to take away from anybody else that I'm overlooking. It's just I happen to see those kiddos on the screen right now. It's great to see everybody tonight. And yes, we can really see Hunter, or I mean Chase, on the screen right there, getting a close up. Okay. All right. It's good to see everybody tonight. Let's get started. What I want to do to start with is take a few minutes to review. And I'm in the wrong spot in my slides. I'll get there in a second. You would think, after doing this now for months, that this would be just down to a science, but it's not. All right, what I want to do is take a few minutes to review some of our more recent Bible time periods and some of the details that we have included so far. And I want to do this, number one, because part of this process, and as Brother Waldron outlines this material, is just review, 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 drill, drill, drill. And in his written material, he's pretty adamant, don't write things down. Obviously, I've not been so adamant with you all. And because I think that I think the process of writing things down actually helps write them in the brain. I know that's how I operate. Others I know have expressed similar thoughts, and so that's and so I'm fine with that. I don't want to, I don't want to become a dictator about how we go about this. But I do want us to take some time to drill these things, to go over them verbally again and again, and to see and challenge ourselves to see how much we remember. So, you know what I'm about to say. Turn over your notes. Don't look at your notes, and let's just see how much together we can remember. So we're gonna back up, not too terribly far, but we're gonna back up to the United Kingdom. What I want to do is start working our way from the time of the United Kingdom up through and get up through the end of the Old Testament in our review tonight. So let's talk about the United Kingdom. And I'm going to start off with a question that I think Chase, Hunter, and Evelyn can probably answer. So let's see what you say. Can you tell me who was the first king of Israel? Who was the first king?
No. The first king, honey.
The first king.
Saul, that's right.
Solomon.
No. Saul was the first king.
David, Solomon.
There you go. All right. And then David, and then Solomon. That's right. So there were three kings of the United Kingdom: Saul, David, and Solomon. Good. All right. I thought they could help us with that. All right. Let's talk about the period of the divided kingdom. You remember, and let's see, have they gotten to divided kingdom history yet in their classes?
I think that's what we're starting in this next quarter.
Okay. All right. So when the kingdom divided, after Solomon, there was one kingdom to the north and another kingdom to the south. All right, Chase, Hunter, and Evelyn, do you remember the name of the kingdom to the north? Do you remember what it was called?
Israel.
Israel. That's right. Good job.
Israel.
Israel. All right. And Evelyn, do you remember the kingdom that was down to the south? All right. Evelyn's big sisters
I
can
can say it.
Okay. Oh, there she is.
What's it called? What's it called? What's this one?
So you got Israel.
What did you just tell us?
And then
Judah.
Judah. That's right. Judah to the south. So you've got
Judah alone.
the kingdom. Yeah, we're going to get to Judah alone in just a minute. So you've got the kingdom of Israel in the north, the kingdom of Judah in the south. Okay. I see Allie. Is Ella there? Okay, Allie and Ella, you can put your heads.
She'll be right back.
What? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear. All right, Allie, how long did this last? About how long was there Israel to the north and Judah to the south? Do you remember?
Maybe
200?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. To about 200 years until Israel was taken away into captivity. Who remembers captivity? That's right. Who remembers the nation or the empire that took Israel away into captivity? This is for everybody.
Assyria.
Assyria. That's right. Assyria. Bonus points, even more bonus points, if you remember the name of the capital city of Assyria, because that plays an important role, particularly in prophecy. I'll give you a hint. It's where Jonah went.
Nineveh.
Nineveh. Nineveh is the capital of Assyria. That's important because in some of the prophecy, you'll read judgment pronounced upon Nineveh, and the reality is that it was judgment pronounced upon all of Assyria. And so you often have this poetic device that's used in prophecy where part of a kingdom or the capital of a kingdom is used to represent the whole. So you might read about judgment on Jerusalem. Well, was Jerusalem the only part of Judah that was punished? No. Or you might read about Samaria. Well, was Samaria the only part of Israel that was punished? You might read about, in reference to Israel, it might be called Ephraim. Again, that's just another name. The same is true about Nineveh and Assyria. So that's why it's important to, as much as you can, remember names that are connected together. So about 200 years. About what year? I shouldn't say about. I should say what year did Israel fall to Assyria?
22.
I got the last part.
42.
Say it again, Chase. There was something 22. What was it?
722.
722 BC. That's right, 722. And that is a little over 100 years before Jerusalem fell to Babylon. And that's why I throw that date out there, just so that you have some idea about the order of events. Okay, who can tell me which major prophet began his work during the time of the divided kingdom? He continued into Judah alone, but he began in the divided kingdom.
Isaiah.
Isaiah, that's right. And which minor prophets connect to the divided kingdom?
Obadiah.
Obadiah's one.
Micah.
Nehemiah.
Micah.
Nehemiah.
No, we're not to Nehemiah yet.
Zechariah.
No, not Zechariah. Zechariah comes later.
Hosea.
Hosea.
Joel.
Joel.
It's better.
Amos.
Obadiah.
Jonah.
We already said.
Jonah.
And Jonah. There we go. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah. Oh, wait, one more.
Micah.
Did we say Micah? Micah.
Yeah.
There's 6 of them. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah. All right. And then again, Isaiah begins during this period, but then continues into the time of Judah alone. All right, let's talk about Judah alone. Again, this is a little bit, it's a little over 100 years from the time that Israel is taken captive by Assyria, and we have Judah alone. We mention 3 kings. They're not the only 3 kings, but 3 kings whose stories are really important to this time period. Which kings did we put in this time period? See if you can remember without looking at your notes.
Josiah.
Josiah is one of them.
Hezekiah.
Hezekiah. You got the 2 good ones. What's the bad one in the middle?
Manasseh.
Manasseh. That's right. That's right. And the reason that these 3 are important is because of the length of their reign, and they represent kind of the roller coaster ride of Judah. So you have bad kings that have reigned. Hezekiah tries to bring Judah back around, but then his son Manasseh comes and basically undoes everything that Hezekiah had done. And then Josiah comes in and tries to restore spirituality in Judah, and then ultimately those that follow Josiah, all of them very short reigns, undo what Josiah has done. All right, let's talk about the prophets of Judah alone. Isaiah started during the divided kingdom. He continues into the time of Judah alone. Which other major prophet fits into the time of Judah alone?
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, good. All right, what minor prophets?
Zephaniah.
Zephaniah,
Nahum.
Nahum,
Habakkuk.
Habakkuk, which is, I think, my favorite minor prophet name. I don't know why. Okay. Even as a kid, I don't know why. I thought that one was just a really neat name. Okay. So that we won't get into details of events during the time of Judah alone, but that gives us an idea. All right, let's talk about captivity. And we summarize the period of the captivity with the 2 major prophets that did their work during the time of the captivity. Who were they?
Daniel.
Daniel and
Ezekiel.
Ezekiel. Here's a hint. They're the only 2 major prophets left. So Isaiah began in the divided kingdom, continues into Judah alone. Judah alone, you've got the work of the prophet Jeremiah. That's not only the book of Jeremiah, but also Lamentations. And so in the captivity, you have Daniel and Ezekiel. All right, now let's talk about the return from captivity. Here's a test for you, okay? I'm going to give you there are 6 books there are 6 books of the Old Testament that fit into the period of the return. Okay? So I'm going to give you 2 books. I'm going to give you 2 of the 6. And you tell me chronologically which came first. Okay? Because this relates to our bullet points. And you need to remember the order of these. Otherwise, the story of the return doesn't make a whole lot of sense. All right? So I'm going to give you 2 books out of the 6, and you tell me which one came first. All right? We'll start off easy. Okay? Malachi or Ezra, which came first?
Ezra.
Ezra. Malachi is the last prophet of the Old Testament. See, I told you I'd start off easy. All right. Which came first, Ezra or Nehemiah?
Ezra.
Ezra. Ezra is the story of the first 2 returns. Nehemiah is the 3rd return. All right. Which came first, Nehemiah or Esther?
Esther.
Esther. Esther fits into the book of Ezra. For bonus points, do you remember between what 2 chapters it fits in the book of Ezra?
Anybody remember?
Anybody remember?
I do.
It's chapters 6 and 7. Chapter 6 and 7. All right. What comes first? Esther or Haggai?
Esther.
Esther.
No, Haggai comes first. And here's how we know that. Haggai came to stir up the people to the rebuilding of the temple. Well, was the temple being rebuilt under the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd return from captivity?
Second.
Could have been 3rd.
And the wall was the 3rd.
The wall was the 3rd. All right.
The temple was first, and then worship was second.
Temple was first, worship was second. That's right. So if they're stirring up the people about the rebuilding of the temple, that means it's got to be in connection with the 1st return, and that's before the story of Esther. All right. Which comes first, Haggai or Zechariah? Yes, they're contemporaries. So that was a trick question. All right. So this is the order of the books chronologically. This is the order of the books chronologically. Now, just remember, of course, that Esther fits into the book of Ezra, but Esther, the story of Esther, is after Haggai and Zechariah. All right, so let's put all of this together. The 1st return was led by Zerubbabel and Jeshua. Now, we don't have books by their name. Where do we read about Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rebuilding of the temple? If it's the 1st return, that's right. That's the beginning of the book of Ezra. That's exactly right. All right. The story of Esther fits between Ezra 6 and 7. Then you have the 2nd return led by Ezra, where they work on purifying the worship. Nehemiah leads the 3rd return to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And then you have, oops. Okay, I forgot. I had that on two different slides. So let me see if I can back up here. Nope, nope, nope. I'll get there in a minute. All right. So if you don't remember anything else about the return, try to remember those four. Okay. The key names, Zerubbabel and Jeshua go together, then Esther, Ezra, Nehemiah. Now, let's fill that out a little bit. All right. You've got the first return led by Zerubbabel and Jeshua. The prophets Haggai and Zechariah fit into this. I meant to edit my slide and I forgot to do it. They started rebuilding the temple. They were stopped, and that's where the prophets Haggai and Zechariah come in. The After a year, the progress on rebuilding the temple was stopped. God sent the prophets Haggai and Zechariah to stir up the people to finish the work. You have the story of Esther. We've talked about that. You have the second return led by Ezra. It concentrates on purifying the worship. And just remember, in the Jewish system, you couldn't really have the worship without the temple. So the temple would come first, and then Ezra comes along to help them with the worship. Then you have Nehemiah that comes to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and then Malachi is the last prophet of the Old Testament. Okay. I want to talk in a little bit more detail tonight about the years of silence, because this is a period, this is the one of the 17 Bible time periods that we probably, most of us at least, know the least about. And that's understandable because it's the years of silence. We don't have anything in the Bible about it. But it is important to have some working knowledge, some general idea. You don't have to be a history buff, but to have some idea about this Bible time period in order to understand how do we get from where we are at the end of the Old Testament to where we are at the beginning of the New Testament. So let's go through this a little bit more slowly than we did last week, and maybe fill in a little bit of detail. We don't have to go into a lot of it. All right, let's see what we remember. What empire captured Jerusalem and took Judah into captivity? The years were 606 and 586 BC. What empire took Jerusalem and Judah captive? We said
Babylon.
Babylon. Very good. All right. Very good. All right. How many years were they in captivity?
400.
70 years. 70 years. Was Babylon still in power after 70 years of captivity?
No.
No. Who had taken their place?
Greece?
We're not to the Greeks yet.
Okay.
We're going to get there, Tom.
Persia.
Okay, I heard a couple of people talking at
Be
one time.
Persia then?
Yeah,
Persian.
the Persian.
King Darius.
King
King
Darius.
Darius, King Cyrus are the two Persian king names that are important to this. So that are important to the return, that is. So sometimes you hear the Medes and Persians. It was kind of a combination empire. Sometimes it's called the Medo-Persian Empire. Sometimes it's just called the Persian Empire. But they took the place of the Babylonians, and it was at the time the empire that was reigning when the Jews were released from captivity after 70 years and allowed to return to Jerusalem. Were the Persians the ruling empire when we get to the opening pages of the New Testament? Were the Persians in charge? No. All right. So if you can remember that the Persians let the Jews return home to Jerusalem, but they weren't in charge by the time we get to the New Testament, that clues you into the first point of this, and that is you have the fall of the Persian Empire. They were in charge, but then they weren't in charge. So something happened to them. All right. And so that's the fall of the Persian Empire. All right. Now, Tom, who took their place?
The Greeks.
There you go. So you have the rise of the Grecian Empire. All right. So as far as world empires go, as far as the big ones that kind of ruled around the Mediterranean world, you have the fall of the Persians, the rise of the Greeks. Now, was the Greek Empire reigning at the time of the New Testament? No.
I don't think
you
so.
still have a lot of Greek influence. That tells you just
The
how
Romans.
strong that influence was, but they weren't the world empire. And so that leads us to the next point, and that is the splintering of the Greek Empire. So after their initial very strong rulers, you begin to have them kind of get too big for their britches. And you have the different parts of the Greek Empire, the city-states we mentioned last week, and you have this splintering that happens. What was once held together begins to break apart. There are two parts of the former Greek Empire that that struggle for control of ancient Palestine. That is, Palestine is kind of caught in the middle of these two parts of the former Greek Empire. That is the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Kingdom. The Seleucid Empire is the region of Syria and Mesopotamia that is to the north and east of Palestine. And the Ptolemaic Kingdom has control of Egypt, that's to the south and west. And so what you have, let me see if I can pull up my map real quick. So this gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. And so you have the so you have the this is ancient, this is Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates River. This is the Syrian Empire ruled by the Seleucids, and then you have the Egyptian Empire ruled by the Ptolemaic the Ptolemaic Kingdom, and Palestine stuck right in the middle. And so the truth of the matter is that this nice, neat boundary line was constantly moving up and down. Okay, and this is during the time when the Grecian Empire had splintered, and you have all of these separate entities striving for control over territory. So, so you have the fall of the Persians, the rise of the Grecians, the splintering of the Grecian Empire, and the struggle between the Seleucids and Ptolemaic kingdoms. Now, the I'm looking back at my notes to make sure I say this right. In this struggle, the Syrian influence won out. Ultimately, the Syrian influence won out and attempted to press uh, Greek culture into the land of the Jews. And they attempted to convert the Jews from worshiping Jehovah to worshiping the Greek god Zeus. And that's important because that's what gave rise to the Maccabean revolt. The Maccabean revolt was the Jewish family of Mattathias, and they were rebelling against this Greek culture influence being forced on them. All right. So the Syrians ultimately won out, and they're going to convert the Jews to Greek culture altogether. At least that's what they thought. And so the Maccabees, or the Maccabean revolt, is led by this family pushing back against that influence, trying to preserve Jewish culture and Jewish religion. During that time, Rome is already beginning to make its push eastward, but Rome isn't there yet. And so you have something of this power vacuum in Palestine. You have this struggle going on. You've heard of the historian Josephus, the Jewish historian Josephus. We learn a lot about this struggle and these wars from the Roman historian Josephus. He actually has one of his famous works is entitled Wars of the Jews. And so we know about the Bible wars, but there are even more during this 400 years of silence. Now, so you have the Maccabean revolt pushing back against the Greek influence. And it's in that context, Greek influence trying to be forced upon the Jews, and Jews under the Maccabees resisting that Greek influence, that you have the rise of parties like the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. Now, we don't read specifically about the Essenes in the New Testament, but we are greatly indebted to them. Who's heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Who can tell me what the Dead Sea Scrolls are?
Ancient manuscripts of the original text of the Bible.
Yeah, they're ancient manuscripts of Old Testament text. Memory fails me right now. I think there is only one book of the Old Testament that is not represented in whole or part in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were discovered in the 1960s in the caves of Qumran, and this was the work of the Essenes, or a party very closely related to them. And so this is an oversimplification, but they were a party that was all about preserving Bible text. Now, again, that's an oversimplification, but that was in response to Greek culture that was being forced upon them. Does that make sense? They're going to preserve Jewish culture and religion, and they know that that can only be done if they have the text of the Old Testament, if they have the law and the Psalms and the prophets, because they know that you can't have Jewish religion and culture if you don't have Jewish text. Right? Does that make sense? And so we're greatly indebted to them, not because they are the only ones that have provided manuscripts, but because the Dead Sea Scrolls in particular provide incredible verification of Old Testament texts. We already had Old Testament texts, but when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, they verified what we already had, and that was important because the Dead Sea Scrolls were older than what we already had. Does that make sense? So if you're going to have an accurate copy of an ancient document, you want that copy to be as old as you can possibly get. And the Dead Sea Scrolls help us. The Pharisees and Sadducees, we are much more familiar with because of Jesus' conflicts with them in the New Testament. But they represent two different approaches to the same problem. What was the problem? The problem was Greek culture going to be forced on the Jews. All right, that's what we're talking about. The Sadducees said, all right, we'll compromise. We'll still be Jews, but we're going to adopt some Greek ideas. The Pharisees said, absolutely not. We are going to protect Jewish ideas at all costs, and our way of doing that is to set up our traditions around them so that we protect them. Again, that's an oversimplification, but it's important to understand how different the Pharisees and Sadducees were, but they were responding to the same problem. Did everybody follow that? We don't read about Pharisees and Sadducees and Essenes in the book of Malachi. But you open the New Testament and boom, they're there. Where'd they come from? Why are they there? This is why. Rome ultimately comes to the Eastern Mediterranean. That includes Palestine. That is the eastern part of the Mediterranean world. And Herod the Great, who again is Greek, but Rome sets him up as a regional king over the kingdom of Judea, and that includes virtually all of Palestine. Okay, I'm about out of time. I'm about to get kicked off of here tonight. And so I'm going to sign off. Thank you for your patience. I realize some of that gets a little bit tedious, but I wanted to slow down a little bit tonight and hopefully some of that makes a little bit more sense. Lord willing, we'll jump into the New Testament material next Sunday. Please join us Wednesday night for our continuation in the Beatitudes. And good night, everybody. Have a great week. Thank you all for studying with me. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.